welcome back. This is Sherry with Heart and Soulful. I'm back in the studio today working on episode 5 of MELAINE'S journal. And if you are just catching me for the first time or for the first time in this series, I will put a link down below to the entire playlist so you can start from the beginning if you'd like. I started this journal off camera while I was sick and could not get through a video without coughing. So I apologize for not binding this actual journal on camera, and I did put a link in this playlist down in the description for a similar journal binding so that you could, if you've never done one like this, you could watch that video. But I decided after someone asked that, it would have been really nice to see this on camera. I'm going to do one on camera that was done exactly like this one. So if you haven't been following along, I'm creating this journal with an open spine. When I started it, I had a book cover like this that did have a spine, and I wasn't sure if I wanted to use the spine or not because of the way I was going to bind it. She asked for a Coptic stitch binding because she wanted the pages to lay flat. So I have a couple of examples of the two different kind of bindings that I do most often. I don't have an exact Coptic stitch binding because that's not my preferred method. So I'm going to show you what she was after asking me for. This is a journal that's an art journal, so it's all blank page. And it's nice because it lays flat. And so when you're working on a spread or anything, it always lays flat, which is really nice. You could even, if you were putting a lot of pressure, you could put something under this smaller side, so that it's even. So she wanted that type of binding, but the Coptic binding, the difference is, so this is really a kettle stitch. The Coptic binding is where the front cover and the back cover would have holes on the actual cover that line up with the holes on your pages. And you stitch the cover right on. So the cover, I would be stitching first and then the first little folio. So you're stitching the cover on as you stitch your book block. I don't like that type myself because just generally this type of stitching, you can see every folio has a gap because it's really hard to get it super tight without tearing your paper. And so I don't like how loosey-goosey that makes your cover. So I like to glue that first folio, the first page of it, to my actual cover. And that way it's just a sturdier book overall. It still is, has a little bit of wobble to it because it doesn't have a spine. But this is my preferred method. So that's what she kind of wanted because it lays flat. The other type that I have done in the past is where you have signatures that are multiple folios. Instead of in the art book, it's just one piece of paper folded in half, made a folio, and then you stack those and stitch them together. You can also make little signatures with more than one folio, like I did here. This would be 1, 2, there's a short one in there, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 8 folios made up one of these signatures. When you do that, I find it interesting because as you flip through, you're not seeing the same paper next to it. You just have a more of a variety as you flip through, and I like that. So I like working with signatures. And in that case, I do a floating spine where there's a piece of recycled material here, and I'm stitching the signature to that little piece before it goes into my cover. And I have videos where I've done that. You've seen me if you've been watching me do this before. So in this case, this one has 5 signatures. They're all sewn with a pamphlet stitch, which is a stitch where you end up with your threads between each hole on the inside, and you can't see it, but it would also be on this outside. And then you can leave a gap in between those just for a little bit of room, because we know when we start filling these up, they get really full. So that is the other way that I like to do it. So if I'm gonna put a spine on, I usually do it this way. If I don't wanna put a spine on it, then I usually do it this way. And you can do these decoratively. I have never done them with beads and that sort of thing, but there are other people out there that have. Maybe someday I will play around with that. This is more new to me, so I'm not an expert at it by any stretch. So I'm just gonna, this is the way that I'm gonna bind it. And when I did Melaine's journal, if you have been following this, I did a combination of small signatures so that I could still use this kettle stitch, and then just here and there a folio of more of art paper. So it's kind of a hybrid where I have signature and then a folio, signature, folio, signature, folio, and on and on. And that's how I bound this one. You can see I'm starting to put pockets and things, and it's already getting this gator mouth, we call it. So I'm going to show you how I did this one today, since I did not do it as part of this series. And then, like I said, it's probably the one maybe that you want to watch first, because I also think that I did not put my signatures together or any of that on camera either. And I have other videos where I show my thought process. And when I did the flip through of this journal, I explained each page why I chose it and that kind of thing. So you will see that just in the flip through of this one. Okay, so we have our cover, and I did this at exactly the stage, you know, that you missed out on the other one. So I had put the folios together, all my signatures together. In this case, they may or may not have the same number of pages inside, but there are 16 signatures, and there are 16 in the other one also. So what we do in this case is we're gonna stitch them together first and then add them to our cover instead of making the holes in our cover, okay? So I'm gonna set this aside. I don't really need it now. What I will do is, if you wanna leave a spine on, I mean, you can do that still and put the book block in, but this is called the book block once we've stitched these together. So you can leave the spine on and do that, and then, you know, you're gonna glue down your first page. That's gonna hold the whole thing in. So you can do that and leave the spine, or you could remove it. If you're gonna leave it on, you wanna make sure that you have, because these are gonna be stitched closer together. They're not going to be with a gap, a huge gap in between, like in this one, because this one I'm stitching it to a piece of cardboard or cardstock. This one I'm not. But what you can do then is, if you want to use the spine, just add more signatures so that it kind of fills up this amount of space. Because mine's going to be a little bit narrower than this, I'll probably end up cutting this off and, you know, using it as a bookmark or a belly band or something like that inside the journal. So I won't do that now because I have to think about what I want to do with this one. So we have our signatures ready to go. I haven't punched holes or anything in them yet. So the first thing that we need to do is to figure out our holes on our signatures. So these are different. This one has 3 sets of 2 holes, and this one has 3 sets with 3 holes. So you can, you know, do what you need, at least 2. You can do 3. So I think for this one, I'll also do just 2, like this one, and then we'll just kind of go from there. So you need to kind of just decide where you want those. They can be further apart. They could be closer together. It's just whatever you want. It's nice to have, you know, a certain distance from the bottom and then in the center. So that is my grouping. And this one, just for kicks, I think I did, my first holes are a 1/2 inch, and then 1 inch away from that, I did my second hole. If I wanted to do that third one, I would do that probably that at the 1 inch. So every 1/2 inch I'd have a hole. Okay, so same here. Then I just found my center, which would be, this is about 8 inches. So my center was at 4. So I just went a 1/2 inch either side of that, so they'd be 1 inch apart again. And then same here, I went a 1/2 inch up and then 1 inch away. So I think I'll do that on this one just because that's what I did here. The smart thing to do would probably be to cut a piece of cardstock or something that's going to be your template for your holes. Instead of, a lot of times I'll get lazy and I'll just take my first one, make my holes, and then use it as a pattern. But because I have multiple pages in here, it'll be easier if I just go ahead and make a template. So I'm just going to get a piece of cardstock and I'm going to fold this in half and cut it to the size of my pages. And these aren't all exact, but they're pretty close. So I'll just grab one and I'm going to go trim this so that these are the same size. Okay, so I have this the same size. And then I need to measure my holes. So I'm gonna go ahead and mark these on the inside. So I'm gonna start here and I'm just gonna do a 1/2 inch in and then at 1.5 inches, that puts them 1 inch away. And then same thing, I'm gonna move it to the 7 so that I'm even here. And I'll do a 1/2 inch in and then 1 inch away. And then I need to find my center. So let's call it, I'm going to use the 8 here just so that I can get an even, find my center easier. So then my center will be at 4. So I'll go a 1/2 inch on either side of that. So that way my holes will be here, if you can see those little marks. So you can do them closer together if you don't want them that even, because I don't have as much space here. You know, you could push them in a little bit. So it's really just whatever you want to do. So I'm just going to leave it like that. Okay, so I don't need my ruler anymore or my pencil. And then I'm going to take something soft. I use this, just some recycled material. It's just squishy. It was in some packing. So I'm going to use this. I keep this pin here. I do have a little punch tool, but if you don't have that, you can use a pin. You just want it to be similar size to the needle you're going to use, because you need your hole to be at least that big. So I just leave this here in case for certain things, but I'm going to use this one because I want my hole to be nice and big enough on in my paper. So the other thing that we're going to use, and I'll show you first, I guess, before I do that, is I'm going to use some binder's thread, and this one is still in the packaging so you can kind of see. I'll put a link down below for this. This is just acid-free, unbleached linen. It's just supposed to be good for bookbinding to reduces the stress on your paper. So I like to use this. It's a little thicker of a string, you know, than a thread than I like. I would like it to be thinner, but if you're a beginner like I am, then the thing that I find most difficult is to not tear in between these when you're trying to pull them tight. And if you use just a single folio like this, or even fragile papers, or not very many pages in your signature, this is more fragile and you might tear that. So to me, that is my biggest struggle, and I'm getting better at it. But if you're new to this, that's the thing that I want to caution you about, to just be careful. Let me see if I can get in here just a little bit more for you. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and use this, and it's a waxed thread. If you are just using like a upholstery thread or embroidery thread or something like that, and you want to wax it, it helps it to glide better. You could just get something like this, and I'll put a link for something like this also down below, but it's just a little wax wheel that seamstresses use to wax your thread. So you would just run your thread through this, and that does help. And I even sometimes, if you're working with something that's taking a long time, your thread's going in and out a lot, the further you get along in your project, there may be no wax left on your thread because it's been kind of going in and out a lot. You can use this to kind of add more if you need to. That's why it's important to get your holes big enough, because you don't want to put stress on your thread. It'll start to fray and look worn and that kind of thing, and you want it to be nice and sturdy and fresh. So getting your holes large enough so that you're not fighting getting that thread through your needle, you know, the needle with the threads, because it's going to be doubled, then it's easier if your holes are a good size. The other thing I'm going to use is a curved needle for this type of stitching. That is the easiest thing. Now you can use it not a curved needle, but it's just going to take you a little bit longer if you're using a straight one, and I'll show you why when we get going here. But a little curved needle, and then you want one with a big enough eye that you're going to be able to get that thread through there. So I do have a needle that is a little smaller than this, but it's not good for this thread because the eye is a little smaller, and you really fight to try to get that in there. So just kind of make sure your thread matches the eye of your needle size. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to sit down to do this, and I'm just going to punch through my template, and that way I have my hole nice and big. And this is tapered, so I can push it further if I needed my hole to be bigger. If I was using some kind of bigger cording, I can do that. So we're going to hope that this is pretty good. And then from here, I'm going to take my first signature. The other thing you might want to do, in case you get interrupted, is put a T for the top of your page so you don't get turned around. If these aren't exact, and you do one this way and one this way, then your holes are going to maybe not line up perfectly. The other thing is, if these aren't exact, they may be off too. So my best advice would be we're going to go to the center of this because we're going to do it from the inside. Get your pages. If you have pages like I do that aren't all the same height, I'm going to go half an inch in for my first hole. So you kind of just want to make sure that you're going to capture that. So you might want to have, if it's close like this, I might want to move this down a little bit. The other thing that I notice on this page, and I don't know that I've gone through all these, so it might take me an extra time here to do this, but I see that I have where this was removed, it's pretty fragile. So I really should put something on this to make it a little sturdier. So I think real quick here, I'm just gonna grab, this is you could use washi tape or anything that you want, but this is my faux aged tape where I just use, if you haven't seen me do this, I take Scotch tape and just put them on these recycled. This is just some sticker backing. Put tape across and then use my Distress Oxides Vintage Photo and just smush that on there. And then I have what looks like antiqued tape all ready to go. So for some reason I had not done this one, so I'm going to go ahead and add this just to reinforce those little holes. And then I can cut this little bit off and just stick that for later. And you can do both sides. I'm just gonna, for the sake of time, just do one side. And then, so for this one, I think what I wanna do is I just want all my pages to be to the bottom. And then that way here, I can also line this up. So that way, no matter what size this is maybe a little shorter than the next one, they will all be even on the bottom. And you can have them not be, it's up to you. But I'm just gonna, I need this on the inside. I'm gonna do this from the inside. Okay, so I just make sure those are nice and snug in my crease. And then I'm just gonna punch my holes. Now, if you don't have something like this, you can fold up a towel. Think of something that you might have around that would work. And then I just like to check and make sure my pages were lined up and that these are, it's really on that seam. So you could even go back the other way just to make sure you can see your hole really well. So that's my first one. And actually, one thing that I'm gonna do on this one that I did on the other one is this first folio and the last one, because I want to bind my cover like this, I need to glue that first folio one side to my cover. And if I don't want to waste this pretty paper, I need something else first. That's what happened in this one, because I wanted that first page to be this. So if you watched any of this series, I made this tracing paper sturdy by adding some cheesecloth to it. And I'm going to do that on this one too. I'm going to use a piece of that on the front and the back. And that way I will be doing it just like the other one. So I have a couple of pieces of this already prepared. So I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to just fold this in half and then go trim it. I'll use this template and I'll just trim it to fit. Okay, so I have my pieces trimmed. Get those strings off. So what I could do is I want it to, this is going to get glued to the front cover so that I don't have to glue this down. So I could either do it as a folio and have it kind of cover that, which I don't like as much, or I can do this and then let's see if I mind this because I liked these two together as well, but I don't know that I mind this because I could actually turn that into a pocket later on and still do that. So I think I'm going to do that at least for the front. So it's going to wrap around like this. I need to make my holes. And then the back one, same kind of thing I need to decide. This is going to glue down. Do I want it wrapped around so that it's like this? Or would I don't, those are fine together, but it's not like it's important. So I think I'm going to go ahead and do this as well. And then the only other thing I need to decide is when I glue that down, do I want it with the textural side up, or do I want to flip it so that the textural side is that way? And then here, when I put this one down, if I fold this, I could have a pocket either way, and it's my smooth side again. So I think I'm going to do this one this direction. Okay. So I need to get this folded again where the okay. I think I'll do my holes, since I already have holes there. Bring this back. I'm going to do my holes just on this. And then put it back with this one. Now the other thing you can do, and I didn't do it here, but I guess I should have, is so that you don't get these all moved. Actually, I know I end up taking these off because they're kind of in your way when you start to stitch, but you can clip them while you're poking your holes just to make sure that nothing gets moved in the meantime, and then we'll take it off when we need to. Okay, so then I just need to go through all of these. And I have 16 of them, and just make sure I have my pages lined up where I want, because sometimes I want to see a border, or maybe I want it centered or whatever. So I'm just going to go through, and I probably did this one upside down now that I look at it. I'm going to go through and poke all my holes. So I'm going to do this and then come back to you because this will take me a few minutes. Okay, so I have mine finished. I did not clip them together. Hopefully you can see the holes are lined up pretty nice and straight. So that should work. I just need to be careful and not mess them up. If I do a lot of books the same size, I can save this and use it, and I already have my holes where I need them. So I'll start a little collection of those in case I sometimes do have books that are the same size. Okay, so the first thing that we're going to do then is, the first part is a little tricky, doing this first set, because when we stitch these, we're really going to work on just these two, and then we'll stitch these two, and then we'll stitch these two. So we're going to go all the way through the book at one end. So it does get a little bit of tricky to hold all of these, you know, while you're working on them, because these are not attached to each other. I would, you know, maybe clip that, except for it's easier for me if I can get into these pages. So I'm not going to do that. So you're going to see it might look a little awkward at first, but once you've done it a couple of times, you know, you'll get the hang of it. So the first thing I need to do is measure some thread for here. And I know I have 16 of these. I know that I'm going to go back and forth through these holes, so I need it to, it's going to connect on the inside. So I need to have enough thread that's going to go this length and then a little knot and connect all of these. So I have, this is an inch, I know that. So I have at least 16 inches, but then I need, you know, I've got these little knots that are going to need to take up some thread also. So it's just going to give me a rough idea. I'd rather have too much than not enough. So I'm just going to measure a length and hope I have enough. Let's see. And then I'm just going to thread my curved needle. Okay, so I'm going to start that first hole. And you can tie a knot in this. Oops. Just so I don't pull it through. We'll tie a knot. So I'm going to go through my bottom hole first. And then I'm going to come up here. And get that as tight as I can. And then I'm going to grab the next signature. And I'm going to go down. And then I'm going to come back up. Once you get this started, it'll be easier, but this first one is a little tricky. Because I want these tight, but I don't want to tear my paper. Okay, so then if I didn't have this knot, it might be easier, but I'm gonna just tie a knot here. I think I'll untie this one. Probably would have been easier had I not tied this knot, but sometimes then you end up pulling it through before you get going here. Okay, I have my first two together and I want them kind of tight. And then I'm just gonna tie a knot, a double knot in this one so they hold. And then I can trim that off later. Okay, so I have my first two, and then I'm gonna grab the next one. And I'm at the bottom hole here, so I'm gonna go through the bottom hole here. Go up here. And you have to be careful. Your thread will twist and that kind of thing, and you'll think you'll have it tight when you don't. So you always want to check the inside and make sure it's tight. And then this is where we start to connect. I have a knot that I hand tied on this side. I want to take this and I want to This is where the curved needle comes in handy. I want to go between those first 2 pages and up on the other side of that knot, where those 2 connected, the 2 previous ones. Now, if I didn't have a curved needle, I would have to drop a straight needle down and then from the bottom come up on the other side of that. So a curved needle is so much easier. And again, my thread's twisting here, so I want to kind of untwist that. And you'll see, because I'm on the on the inside, it's creating a little knot there. And that way I can pull that tight. Okay, so now I have those 3 are connected. So then I go, and from the top then I'm gonna add in the next one. So I don't go in the bottom hole, I'm gonna go in the top of those 2. So you can see if I had 3 holes that I was working with, I would have to, it's a little more complicated. I'd be coming up and then going down the center one, coming up, going back down the center, you know, and still doing my little knots. So I think that if you're just doing this for the first time, doing a 2-hole one is probably easier. Because otherwise it's kind of like doing a pamphlet stitch, but with a knot in each one. Okay, so I'm going to pull that tight. And this is where you just kind of want to be careful that I don't tear anything. And then come up this one. Hold those together as tight as you can. You don't want to tear this. And then I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to go keep this thread to the left. I'm going to go into between the 2 pages before this one, and go under that where they cross and pull that through, and it's creating that little knot. This is kind of in my way. And then you just add in the next one. And again, this one I'm at the bottom now. So you can see once you get an entire section done, when I move to these 2, it'll be much easier. But right now I don't have, my pages are not connected to each other at all. So I'm going to go in the bottom hole. Trying to find my holes. This little thread is in my way. Okay, as tight as I can do that. It's not going to stay till I get over there and kind of lock it in. So I'm just going to go here, make sure I don't have any twists. And now I can kind of get these held tighter. Tug on that just a little, you don't want to tear anything. And again, I'm going to hold this to my left. I'm going to go in between the 2 pages before, 2 signatures before, my needle under this thread, and that'll create that little knot. And pull that tight. So if you do it very neat and tidy, you should have a straight line of knots on both of these sides. Oops. A straight line of knots. And that's where you could see, you could add a bead, you know, before you go in between those knots. Like I'd put a bead on here and then, you know, next time I'll be catching it with a knot. So that's just, we're going to continue on. So I'm going to go ahead and finish to the end of this one so that I can show you how I finish it off, but I'm not going to do, I'll just edit this part out because it's going to take me a little while. Okay, I'm back and I'm to my last signature, so I wanted to turn the camera back on. This is much easier to do not on camera because you can take your time and lay them down and open the pages and not have to worry about being in frame. So if you're very slow, methodical, you know, make sure you get the little twists out of your thread, then it actually goes pretty smooth. So I'm gonna find, hopefully you can see my hole here. And then I'm going to do the same thing, lock in that knot to the previous one. Trying to keep my twists out. So I have that last little, get in focus here, that last little knot. So I might want to just do a double knot on that one as well, so that I don't have to worry about it coming undone. The other thing I could do is, had I left this tail and leave a tail on this side, maybe I'll do that on this side, is when I go to glue them into my book, I can glue those down as well. You'll see I'm probably going to add tabs like I did on the previous one, just to cover those, because my stitching, these are pretty good, but they don't always turn out looking so perfect, and so then I end up wanting to cover them up anyway. So I'm going to tie another little knot in this so that I have kind of a double knot. And then I had, like I said, I clipped that tail off because it was bothering me, but I really should have left it on just for safety until I get it all glued in. So you can see I had, you know, more thread than I needed, but better too much than not enough. So that's okay. It's not enough to do the next one though, so I'll have to cut another piece. But you can see that's all, you know, pretty tight in there. Everything's connected. And you do have little gaps in between each one, but I did it pretty good. It's not too bad. So that's the beauty of this type of stitching, is that when you're working in your journal, then even with signatures like this, as long as you keep them to like 2 or 3 folios, they're not very thick, you get that interest as far as when you're turning the pages, but your book still lays pretty flat when you're working on it. So I'm going to go ahead and do these other two just the same way that I did this one, and then my book block will be finished bound. So I'll come back at the end. I won't do this on camera because it just takes a bit of time. I'll come back afterwards and show you what I do to finish this off and get it into my book. So we'll see you back here in just a bit. Okay, I'm back, and I think this is the best I've ever done. So it just shows the more you do something, the better you get at it. So I could actually even leave these because they're so nice and straight. But I think I'm gonna go ahead and do it like I did the other one, because I wanna show you how to do that too. And I also like how it looks. So I think I've got these really knotted pretty well. So if you weren't gonna do the tabs that I'm gonna show you, you might leave these so that you can glue them under or whatever on your cover. But you want to keep in mind that they may show through whatever it is that you're going to be gluing down. This paper is sheer, so I'm going to kind of see that string, and you might not like that. So you kind of want to be aware of that. You might be doing something solid that you would not see that, and then you could leave it. But I'm going to go ahead and trim them off because you're going to see I don't really need them. I'm going to end up putting glue here, so it is going to make those have glue on them in addition to the knot, so I don't have to worry about the stitching coming undone. So I'm just going to clip these off. And then I'm going to go ahead and let's see if I have some lace in my little tea-stained lace thing, if I have enough. I may need to do some more, but I think this is probably long enough. This is just some tea-stained, like hemming lace that I have, and I think I'll put that on there. And I think when I did it before, it came out this kind of grungy looking color. So I think what I had done on this one is I had used my Vintage Photo Distress Oxide and dirtied up my threads. I do that on the insides too. Just if you know me, I don't like bright white things normally. So I will even go through and kind of look at the center of my signatures where you see the thread. And if I think it's just standing out too bright white, I'll just kind of dull it up with some Vintage Photo and it kind of blends in better. So that's what I had done on here because I wasn't sure if I was going to leave them exposed or not. But what it did is it took my, when I put the glue on, it will activate that and it will go through the lace and make my lace look a little more grungy. And I kind of like that. So I am just going to put a little bit. I don't need very much because it's going to be activated with the glue. So I've just kind of dirtied those up a little bit. Okay, so then I need to put some lace. And I'm going to go ahead, and I have plenty, I think. So I'm going to go ahead and cut these all, I think, at once so they're the same length because you are going to see those through a little bit. So let's say this much. Okay, so for this, to glue these on, I'm going to use my art glitter glue because it dries faster than my bookbinding glue. And I need these to kind of dry quickly. So I'm just going to put some glue on it and then my lace. Okay, and then you'll want to let those dry. Okay. So for this, sometimes you can just tear it if you want it to be ratty, you know, and see if it's fragile enough, or you can cut it. I like kind of a torn, frayed edge, so I got lucky. And then I can use this for a belly band or make a bookmark out of it. So I'll put that aside. And now I have my, this is dry enough. So then I just want to kind of set it, you know, like so. And I think I'm going to like that. Okay. So then I'm just going to take my, do one side at a time. And I want to just kind of line it up. So that this paper will be glued down right over the paper that's underneath, and that'll be perfect. Okay, so while I have it nice and even, I want to glue those little tabs down. I'm going to pour a little bit of this. Let's see, what do I have? Since it's kind of clogged, I'm just going to pour a little bit. Okay, so line that back up. And put my little tabs down. Oops, I moved. I'm just using a speedball brayer that I use for glue. You can also grab an old credit card or something and just make sure you have that nice and pressed down. And then you want to put some weight on that. I might check it and make sure. It's nice when you have that paper cut to the exact right size and you still have, you cut it to fit this. It makes it easy to line it up. So I need to put weight on this, but I think I'm going to go ahead and first glue down the other side. Now, this is tracing paper, and I put it on wet glue, so it does get some ripples in it. So, you know, you can kind of, as it's initially setting up here, just kind of roll this back and forth to try to work out any of those little textural lumps that we're going to get. But they're really not bad. You can kind of see them a little bit, but just some of the character that happens when you use something thin like a vellum or tracing paper. It's just kind of the nature of it when you get it wet with glue. But I do want to use, you know, something strong like this bookbinding glue instead of glue stick or something like that. So that feels pretty good. I'm going to go ahead and do this other side. So for this one, I do want to really be careful and make sure that my book is setting level too. And then hopefully I can just open this without moving it too much. And see that my paper is going to line up like so. And that looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and put the glue down on this one. We'll just set that there and I'll have to redo that. Okay, so I need to do the tabs, but I also want to line up that paper and make sure that it's going to be all the way before I put those tabs down. So I do have that in the right spot. And before I stick that down completely, I want to make sure that's good. Let's see how my front one is looking. So again, I want this to dry really well and put some weight on it. So normally what I do is I'll grab something non-stick because I really want to put the weight right here at this crease on both sides because that's going to keep my book together. So what I like to do is, let me grab, so this is just some recycled sticker backing, the slick side. I'm gonna lay that down just to, I don't have the glue coming through, but I just want to protect whatever. And then I need a couple of books. I keep a couple of books, oops. And put that right against that edge. And same on the other side. And that way it will keep me from having any stress there. And then I have some heavy weights. You want to maybe put more books on top of this if you don't have something else that weighs a lot. But I have these weights, some heavy weights that my husband gave me. And that just will weigh that down while that dries. And so I'm going to give it a little bit of time and then we'll take a look at it and see where we're at. Okay, so I've let this dry overnight, and I wanted to show you how it turned out and make a note of something that I didn't mention when I put the cover on this. So I'm going to mention that first. When you put a cover and leave the paper that is already attached on, like I wanted to because it was in good shape and I liked the color of it. If I tried to tear it off and it didn't come off in one piece, I would have all kinds of different color where you saw the chipboard through and part of the paper and that kind of thing. It would look really messy. And this is the tracing paper, which you can kind of see through, so I didn't want to have a mess behind that. When you do that and you put as much glue as I did, it wets the paper that's already there, and you have a good chance that some of that will pull away from the chipboard. So you want, since this is all being held on, together by just these tabs and this first page, you really want a good adhesion. So you might have to, I can kind of pull this away a little tiny bit, you can see, put a little extra glue in there, and it's you can do it at the time, but you're then adding just more wet to it. So I kind of like to check it, and then today I'll add a little bit more just in that little bit, because I don't want it to be pulling away at all. And give it a nice tug, because you want it, you can see how it's going to kind of pull away on one side, the other side's nice and sturdy. So you just use something with a fine tip applicator. Like I'll use my art glitter glue because it dries really fast, and it has this, even though I need to clean this, this is just a finer tip, so you can get into nice little crevices. So I need to make sure this is cleaned out before I try to use it, and then kind of get in that little gap. So I'm really happy. I like how this turned out. My stitching turned out actually really straight, that I could have just left it, but I always like to do a little decorative thing anyway, and then that way you have just a little decoration, plus it gives you that extra bit of support because you've glued those down underneath your paper. So let's just do a little flip through, and then I'll show you. So this is a naked journal that I could just list like it is, or just start adding pockets. But you can see as I flip through this, by doing this type of binding, the Kettle stitch on really thin signatures that just have 3 folios in each one. You can even do one with 2, but if you keep the number down, they're nice and thin, and your pages will stay fairly flat while you work on your journal. And that's just kind of a nice way to go through your book. But I'll just kind of let you see the papers that I chose. Again, I always try to kind of just have something that flows nice to the next page, and gives you a little variety by having these little 3 folio signatures, because you're not looking at the same page, right next to each other. But just kind of watch for some sort of color to flow, or maybe alternate the types of papers that you use, some more graphic things and some with text, have it where your text and things can be turned different ways. I often like to put 2 digitals next to each other that just complement each other. And I also like doing those maybe on the outsides of my folio, of my signatures, and that's where your little gap will be. But you could use washi tape, or just glue down another paper as decoration, as part of a spread, and then you'll cover that little gap. Some of these I have already reinforced with some of my little strips you've seen me make, or using fabric or washi tape or paper or tea bag to reinforce where things are maybe a little more fragile. This one, you can see, goes the other direction, so it's just kind of nice to add some different interest. And your pages don't always have to be full pages. I like how those go together. And these, I have not made pockets, but I cut the flaps so that they can either be flip outs or turned into pockets. Just a fun, I really like the variety of papers that I used in this one. And a lot of these, there's some digitals, but there are a lot of really old actual original papers in here as well. I really love how this one has the doily on one side and then the sort of doily pattern in that digital on the other side. This is really old elocutionist. I think it's 1881. And then in the MELAINE'S journal, you've seen how I used the doilies to turn those into little pockets. But you can see the pages stay, you know. I'll show you another one done the pamphlet stitch way with larger signatures, and you'll see the difference of how these lay nice and flat compared to the other type. This one I didn't cut that, or maybe I did and it did get kind of stitched in there. I can't really tell. No, I think it does. I think it folds through to the other side, so you do have kind of a pocket already started there. Yeah, there's the other side of it. And you see how I stagger them. I don't have them even full width, so that's kind of fun. Things printed on even just, this was probably just some recycled something that I ironed and then just printed. Like some packaging paper. I don't have a kit yet, but I'm putting together kind of a vintage wallpaper kit. I'm just trying to collect some more things to put in it. But at some point, I think I'll put a kit together in my Etsy shop of digital wallpaper. And I think when I do that too, I may have the same wallpapers, but in different colorways. And again, this is a math book, but then it's with some ledger. I just kind of like those together. And then some map. And that's the end. So I really like the variety of papers in those. My stitching came out fairly even. So this one could be ready to go. It doesn't have a closure on it, or I may do more in it. And then also it could have a spine cover, but I really like that one, turned out nice, so I think I'd leave it just like it is. Now, comparing this type with the kettle stitch to one with a pamphlet stitch, this one has 5 signatures, and I did do a spine cover on that one. This is just one I think I did when I was doing multiple journals at one time. I don't know that I even have this one, but you can see, as far as on a video, you can see that the pages don't lay as flat because you have, more pages within each signature. I mean, they're still not hard to work with, but it's just, I'm just showing you the difference. They don't lay as flat as the other type, the other style. So that's just something to keep in mind when you decide how you want to stitch something together. This obviously is much faster to put together than this style. This takes a little longer, but you have a benefit from doing that too. I want to show you again, this one is an art journal, and it's just each individual folio. They're not put together as signatures at all. So it's a little more time consuming to do this. And also this one has 3. I personally think, since I just did this one recently and this one, this is faster. I prefer this just 2 2 and 2 to the 3, 3 and 3. This takes, quite a bit longer to do, but it's kind of whatever you prefer to do. So I'm really liking this style put together this way, and I think I'll do more like this. So that is it. I hope this helped explain. If you've been watching Melaine's journal, it will explain how I put this binding together. But you can see these have the same number of folios, signatures in them, and you can see how much thicker this one is getting already, because now I've added pockets and things to this one. So they always get chunky, but that's kind of the fun, right? So that's it for this one. I'm going to continue working on Melaine's journal, and I'm getting close, but I think I may have 1 or 2 more videos I want to do. So that's it for me for today. Have a great rest of your day. Now go make something. Bye.